How does one build a B2C brand? Now, I know this is a very wide question, but let me break it down a little bit on how generally people think about it, and probably a lot of people in this room think about it, कि you have to burn a lot of money, right? तो जाओ खूब सारी advertising करो और उससे brand बन जाएगा. Is there some framework to think on how do you build a B2C brand? How do you think about product experience, burning money, organic versus inorganic? When do you start burning money? Any thoughts?
Yeah, sure. I think that's the biggest misconception, that you burn a lot of money to build a B2C brand.
Sorry, you can hear? Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, awesome. So I think fundamentally, I think the most powerful thing that will help you build a good quality B2C brand is the power of your insight and the quality of your product, and how well it solves that problem or that opportunity or that insight. And I think a lot of good businesses actually stumbled upon that. Then they became brands. Then they realized that they're becoming brands, and then they started making money and started structuring themselves. Some of the core things like reliability and trust. India continues to be a trust efficient market. So if customers seek out that high level of trust and high level of high fidelity of it always works, right? Yeah.
Thank you, Mohit, for being here today. And I have a few questions to ask you about building B2C brands. A lot of people are interested in B2C companies. But what I'll do is I'll ask you a few questions and then open up for questions, right? So that we can make this more interactive and keep plugging questions. So starting from where Shirinder left, right? So you moved from Pepsi to MakeMyTrip and then to Zomato. And Pepsi, I'm sure, is a very different company, from MakeMyTrip and Zomato. So how was it different, and how did you make this decision from moving from Pepsi to a digital company, and was there apprehensions and what was the motivation?
Yeah, I think that's a question I've answered a number of times. I think the context you have to understand is very different. And first of all, thank you for having me here. It's wonderful to interact with so much of youth and energy and optimism and entrepreneurship in the room. I get energized by all of you folks, inspired by all of you folks. So thanks for letting me be here and talk to you guys.
Pleasure.
I think the context was very different. India was entrepreneurship and startups were not a big thing. We're talking about 2007, 2008. It wasn't as if the folks coming out of IITs and IIMs and all were like jumping to get into startups. In fact, the other way around.
Yep.
There were very few. The e-commerce ecosystem was very, very underdeveloped. 80% of e-commerce was travel, and all of travel was just flight bookings, right? So, the e-commerce platforms at that time used to be Time Shopping and India Plaza and folks like this, right? Flipkart, Zomato, many of these companies were actually born in 2008. And then started by selling just books, and by 2009 2010 they were just selling books, right? And then slowly formed. And Vintra used to do I remember Snapdeal used to print booklets of coupons, right? And and they used to do these hampers for little children, like in maternity homes, right? That's the business they were in. Vintra used to do customized mugs and t-shirts, right? So the ecosystem was very different. So it isn't that one was really inspired. I think, I had a super run in Pepsi, which was a little more like a startup amongst FMCGs at that time, because it was a challenger. Coke had bought Thumbs Up, and they were the much larger player. Pepsi was a challenger. It was hacking its way, trying to build a market for itself. A bunch of really interesting and amazing people to work with and learn from. And I did 7 different roles in 10 years, so it was a lot of fun. But I think by the time we got to 2007 or so, it had started settling down. And I started feeling like if I look ahead, I would do the same thing in the next 10 years. And that made me a little uneasy. And I felt like I was getting old too fast, and I needed to challenge myself. And concurrently, I had a few friends who had built a BPO startup. BPOs used to be telecom, and BPOs used to be cool. They were actually the sunrise sectors at that point in time. So I got inspired by those people, but I didn't have the money. So I thought, let me join a startup. And I just pinged a few people and, bumped into deep and had interesting conversations, and I ended up at MakeMyTrip. So it wasn't actually, like a big epiphany or some major drive or something. I just stumbled into it. I did have by those those standards, I did have a certain amount of risk appetite, but that's about all.
Yeah, no, very interesting. And I remember those times because we started in 2007, right? And anyway, 2008 was global recession, so it was the worst time to start. But it was a very, very different time, right? Like, for example, when we used to hire people and offer them ESOPs, no one cared for ESOPs. So people would only negotiate on the salary and said ki ESOP nahi chahiye, right? And the other thing, as you were talking, I think one of the things which has changed drastically was that there were no playbooks, right? Today you have a playbook that अगर B2B SaaS बनाना है तो कैसे बनाना है, B2C company बनानी है तो कैसे बनानी है, तब तो लोग कूपन छाप रहे थे, right? So no one had really scaled in India to say that, look, this is the example. So very interesting times, and that leads me to the next question, Mohit, that how does one build a B2C brand? Now, I know this is a very wide question, but let me break it down a little bit on how generally people think about it, and probably a lot of people in this room think about it, कि you have to burn a lot of money, right? तो जाओ खूब सारी advertising करो और उससे brand बन जाएगा. Is there some framework to think on how do you build a B2C brand? How do you think about product experience, burning money, organic versus inorganic? When do you start burning money? Any thoughts?
Yeah, sure. I think that's the biggest misconception, that you burn a lot of money to build a B2C brand.
Sorry, you can hear? Okay. Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, awesome. So I think fundamentally, I think the most powerful thing that will help you build a good quality B2C brand is the power of your insight and the quality of your product, and how well it solves that problem or that opportunity or that insight. And I think a lot of good businesses actually stumbled upon that. Then they became brands. Then they realized that they're becoming brands, and then they started making money and started structuring themselves. Like if you go back and think about Zomato, or you go back and think about MakeMyTrip, they started off as very simple. The name tells you what it does. Zomato started off as foodie bay, started solving basic problems. So a lot of these things actually started with a clear consumer insight, solved it well, created a high quality product experience that people loved. And then they figured out how to wrap it with a wonderful and likable personality, right? That people will associate with, that can become their friend. And I think that's where branding starts to play a role. But I've seldom seen, cases where people do the other way around, where you create a great wrapper and then you figure out how to put great content inside it, right? So I think the great content inside, which is the quality of your product and service, the problem that you're solving, the sharpness of the insight, right? The power in that insight. I think that's the most important thing. Equally, I think if you look at new age brands like Cred and all, right? They've also demonstrated the value of caring about the brand right up top, right? Or if you, from the Zomato ecosystem, if you see Grofers turning into Blinkit, right? Yes, there is a sharp insight that 10 minutes can create can do magic, right? And people want that magic in their lives, and that magic, people will pay for that magic, and they would love that magic, right? But also then, the choice to transition from Grofers to Blinkit, and making sure that Blinkit is seen as a certain way, it has a certain personality, and crafting it with care and with love and with consistency, right? I think that's very powerful too. But again, to my mind, these are the two things that I would do a lot of. One, I would focus very deeply on the insight, the solution, the product or the service that I'm building as a solution, and really make sure that that's absolutely top-notch, high quality. People would love to come back to it. People love to tell other people about it, their friends and family about it. And second, as early as possible. I don't think the brand is about. Gone are the days when the brand was about an ad, right? Or or it was about a tagline. I think the brand is about all these interactions that consumers have with your product. All of those are brand conversations, right? So therefore, even if you're talking to 100 consumers, right, or 1,000 consumers, which is really early stage in the brand, how you have that conversation starts shaping your brand. And therefore, entrepreneurs who have never learned branding, like Dipinder, right, but have crafted beautiful brands, One thing they've been clear about is that I have a very clear vision in my mind on what that brand is, what its personality is, and how it's going to talk to her or how it's going to present itself, right? So therefore, I would say caring about the core insight in the product and service is a solution, building a really high quality one, and then having a very clear view of the personality of that brand and making sure that it is manifesting itself in a beautiful, sharp way, in the way that the brand talks to its customer, the UI, UX, the conversation, the tonality, the copy that you do, and so on and so forth. I think that's the beginning of your brand journey. You do that well, and you start seeing that love. That's the point at which you can make a choice, if you are well capitalized, to start spending money onto it. In the product terms, you call it product market fit.
Yeah.
In branding terms, you'd call it customer love. But I think they're sort of two sides of the same coin.
Got it. And is my understanding correct? The first part of your message, Mohit, was that first make sure that you have understood the problem deeply. You have understood that your product is actually solving the customer's problem, right? And you have a happy customer, which we also measure with tools like NPS, which are very popular these days. And the scaling piece comes after that.
Absolutely.
After you have really cracked and you know that you will be a happy customer. And I think the second part of your message was that think of how the brand is positioned, what is the messaging, and so on. How does the brand really feel and kind of look. Let me ask you another question which people think about a lot, and it's interesting, right? Like Zomato first began with a lot of SEO and being ranked top on pages. What do you think, when people are building these products and when they're trying to create distribution, you can do it both organically and inorganically, right? Organically through doing kick-ass SEO, etc., and inorganically through advertisements. Do you see how these two should be balanced? Any thought on that? Because organic takes more time, but then pays you well in the longer term, whereas inorganic gives you very quick movement. But any insight from that point of view?
I think these worlds are converging very fast.
Okay.
There was a time when SEO was very relevant, and you could hack your way through it. You could create deep capabilities in the organization, and they would go a long way in getting you this organic. I think increasingly the algorithms of these large platforms like Google, Facebook, Instagram, etc. have become so smart, and their monetization is so deep that you need to have high quality content and very high engagement level content, whether you're doing organic or inorganic. So the core capability that you need is, do you have your finger in the pulse on high quality content creation or not?
Understood.
Right? If you look at it again, the Zomato, the brand is not built on its TV advertisements. It's built on its social conversations.
Yeah.
Now, once you do those social conversations and you find something that's working, then you can say, to accelerate it, I'm going to put some more money behind it.
Sure.
Right? But that building that core capability of being able to create high quality, high engagement content is what will allow you to do well both in organic and inorganic.
No, very fair, very fair. Let me ask you one more question and then take one or two audience questions. You've now been working with consumer-oriented companies for a very long time. Have you seen in ways the customer has changed? Is the customer of 2000 very different from the customer of 2010? Is very different from the customer of 2020? And we were just discussing about Instagram, before. But any insights on preferences, how people view brands, what kind of experience they want? It's the evolution of that.
Yeah, so look, I think there are some things in which customers are very consistent in what they have always wanted and what they still want. And there are some areas in which they've evolved significantly, right? For example, the basic quality bar of customers on UI, UX, on quality of content, I think has significantly improved across socioeconomic segments, right? Earlier you could say, this is a cheap product, so therefore it has poor UI or it has a bad look or a tacky look. Gone are those days, right? So there are many areas where customers have generally become a lot more experimentative, right? So earlier when you launched a product, niches were not viable or were not large enough. Right? Now you can actually build a product for a niche, and it will actually find it viability and meaningful scale.
Sure.
Because the market itself has evolved and expanded, and it's much larger. Having said that, some of the core things like reliability and trust. India continues to be a trust efficient market. So if you know, customers seek out that high level of trust and high level of high fidelity of, you know, it always works, right?
Yeah.
You know, we always had this thing, people used to tell us when we were at MakeMyTrip, you know, that your UI is poorer, right? You know, your tech is also okay. Why is it that you do well? Why are you a more loved brand? Because one thing we would focus on is, two things we would focus on. One is that it will always work. It will always be up. It will always work. It will always throw up results. It will be fast. It will not go down. And if it goes down ever, we will have very high quality customer service and we'll take care of it. Right. So in terms of building trust in a customer first system, I think that's something which is timeless and it always works in India.
Sure,
right.
sure.
So there are things in terms of receiving price value, great price value, right, across segments. I think on one side consumers are willing to, you know, I remember I was on the board of this venture called Zovi. It was an early stage D2C brand in 2011, right? It was a men's sort of apparel brand, very high quality products built by some really good, smart industry folks from the industry. But this was a web wala time, no mobile, you know, no Instagram to really get to people and explain to them what the brand stands for, and so on and so forth. So eventually that business did not do very well. It died, right? But the you know, the opportunity, the ability to sell a 1,500 rupee shirt, right, high quality shirt, which let's say Tommy Hilfiger would be selling for 3,000 at that time. Similar shirt will be selling at 1,000 rupees, 1,200 rupees. The ability to sell a 1,200 or 1,500 rupee shirt on internet was so low because people wouldn't try it.
Yeah.
Today people buy 20,000 rupee lehengas and cord sets after looking at it on Instagram, right? So therefore the risk-taking ability, the ability to try things and put money behind it for Indian consumers has come a long way. But at the same time, they still seek price value from everything that they look at.
Sure. No, very, very useful, and you know, two insights on what Mohit is saying, right? There's some things which are constant about products, but remember the second insight, according to me, which Mohit was giving was that any product cannot be great on everything, right? So every product finds its niche, right? Like I can give you from my own example. We were doing assessment products for the industry, right? We never had the best UI UX, but we had the best science, right? So we said that if you use our assessment product, be sure you are hiring good people, right? But जो बंदा आके assessment लेगा, वो शायद अगर किसी और कंपनी की assessment ले रहा होगा तो वो कहेगा कि UI उनका better था, आपका कम था. So within a market, if the market is large enough, if you can find your competitive edge, right? That is one thing you should always know, right? What is your competitive edge in a market? But that only works when it is a large enough market, and that's the other thing which Mohit was saying, that thankfully the market has expanded quite a bit, right, in India. And also, I mean, it's not just market, a vanilla market. What we are talking about, the digital market has expanded quite a bit, and the digital behavior has also changed quite a bit, which means there's a lot more opportunity to build consumer products, right? Like there were a huge number of gatekeepers 15 years back if you were to build a high quality product just to get to the consumers, and those gatekeepers have now gone, because you can shoot an Instagram video yourself, and if that Instagram video is great, and if you use Big Buddy's B-roll in it and make it greater, you know, you can reach thousands of people, and who might, and if there's a product promise, as Mohit is saying, you know, they will come and buy it, right? So, but look, your product needs to work, and second, there needs to be brand differentiation, and then you need to get your branding right. So let me take one or two questions from the audience. Yeah, person at the back. Yeah, can you stand up so that we can see you? No, just so that we can see you. Yeah.
So very general question, maybe someone else in the audience. Like you talked about the difference between the audience before and after, like 2011 and 2020. I wanted another perspective regarding the generation. A lot of brands and companies are coming up and saying we are a Gen Z first company, we are a millennial first company. So is there actually the difference in the behavior, in the purchasing and the consumption pattern for the Gen Zs versus millennials versus Gen Ys?
I definitely see a difference.
Can I, Mohit, repeat the question, because you also
sure.
recording, right? So the question was basically that you know, there's new terms now floating, which are Gen Z and millennials and so on, and a lot of companies say that they are Gen Z first companies or millennial first companies. So, any thoughts? Can you demystify from a consumer point of view what is Gen Z's consumer habits or millennial consumer habits, and are they really? Is this a fad or is there something really about this?
Sure, sure. So, I think a lot of you folks in the room would have a point of view on that, right? Like the Gen Z folks would not be found dead in stuff that is cool for millennials. But the millennials would have to be found in stuff that is cool for Gen Zs. And I think generationally, the sort of a certain sort of trend-setting part of the generation has always been the definer of cool, right? So that keeps moving. At some point it used to be people in their early 20s, 20, 21, 22, young adults. At some point in time it was 18, maybe now it is 15. People who are really defining what's in, what's out, what's cool, what's not. But I do think that there is meaningful difference in the choices, lifestyle choices, definition of cool, the decision-making parameters for people, generations that are actually many years, like 5, 7, 10 years apart from each other. In that block, definitely there's a meaningful change in the priorities, behaviors, drivers of decision-making, drivers of emotions, etc., etc. And maybe it's even thinner slices.
Yeah.
These are just easier to talk about, and that's why people keep talking about it, because as a currency, it has these words have got a lot of currency. Like Gen Z, a lot of people use. It's easy to understand, right? Millennial, easy to understand. That's why people use it. But if you are a builder, if you are a creator, I would actually encourage you to go even sharper.
Yeah.
I think understanding who's your customer, who are you building your product or service from, is very important, and you probably want to go even narrower, right? I think there is this concept of the first 1,000 super fans, which I think is very powerful, right? To figure out who are these people, who would you want to be your first 1,000 super fans for your brand or your service or your product, is a very important, very powerful one. But you can say it in many different ways. The core of it is please define and understand your target audience very sharply and understand them very deeply, and they are different. In fact, I struggle to think of ways in which they are same. There are very few areas in which they are very similar to each other. In most areas, they are actually different. So it's very, very important, I would say, like for example, this whole fast fashion thing, right? Now like this thing of I'd rather buy cheap and I'd rather buy cutting edge and use and throw is something which is very, very Gen Z, in its adoption, right? That doesn't mean 100% of it is being bought by Gen Z. Like I said, what Gen Z does and millennials find cool is they start adopting as well. So in terms of consumption, maybe some millennials are buying it also. But you've got to, when you're building your product, you've got to have a very clear idea who you're building it for, and that's Gen Z, right? So know who you define, who your audience is, who your target audience, who your super fans are very clearly, and then go really deep and understand them well.
And Mohit, one word which is generally used in this regard, and we are just using upstairs also, is persona. Right? Can you talk a little bit about what does this word persona mean?
I think there's a lot of jargon that people have used, like marketers have used over a period of time, and persona is one of them. But in simple terms, it's basically understanding who the person is, not just by the demographics, ki yaar ye age hai, they are in a big city or they are in a small city, they are professionals or they are this, but also beyond that, right? In terms of personality, in terms of life choices, in terms of lifestyle, in terms of media habits, other consumption habits, key drivers of their decision making, and so on and so forth. Basically, you try to personify that person as much as possible and understand who they are. Obviously, every individual is different, but you try to work at the 80th percentile and try to create a persona that like represents your audience largely.
Sure, that's helpful. I think if someone raised, go ahead.
So I wanted to ask this question. Let's suppose you are building a B2B brand. Like if you are building a B2C brand, like suppose you are building Zomato, so you could see how Swiggy was doing and you could use your competitor's product. But if you are building a B2B product, so how do you see like what your competitor is doing? Or do you go in the market with just a product which is better than MVP and see what the customer or the business need and then shape your product? Or you go with a 100% best product into the market.
Maybe we can take 2-3 questions and then answer them together. Just
Sure.
make it. Yeah, go ahead.
We spoke recently about how digital penetration has grown over the years. But a very unique trend that we're seeing is that digital first brands like Lenskart or Mahal for that matter have started online but now they're moving offline where they're opening up a lot of stores. So just want to hear your view on, is it online is all hype and eventually you end up in offline or something else?
Sure. Maybe one more from the back. Yeah.
Hi sir, this is Ayush. So I'm the co-founder and chief product officer at MakeMyTrip, and this is my team, Kush, Karthik and Nikhil. What we do is we basically work with a lot of institutes and corporates such as IITs, IIMs and interns, a lot of companies out there, and we build education programs for them. So as a PM, in our mindset, we are very clear that how to build, consumer products and brands. But many a times what happens in this space is your consumer is very different from your customer. Because you're dealing with an institute, and for instance, that's probably you might have also faced while working with designing Amcat for that matter. So many a times what happens is you end up building a customer product which is not liked by the consumers, or sometimes you end up building a consumer product which is not liked by the customers. So there is a proper sort of trade-off that you have to manage. So I just wanted to understand your perspective on maybe what are your thoughts on this consumer-customer trade-off in this particular space?
So 3 questions. One is offline versus online. The other one is consumer versus customer. And the third one was on B2B product. So in any
Yeah.
order. Yeah.
Let's start in the order in which they were asked, right?
Yeah.
So I think I fundamentally feel that B2B, B2C does not matters less. Of course, it matters from a go-to-market point of view. B2C products are easily available online. B2B product, you'll have to work hard to get either a demo ID or something else. But that's the jugaad that you have to do, right? As a creator, if your competitor's product is out there, you do have to understand it, right? So, how do you understand it is something that you'll have to figure out. But you have to understand it, and you have to factor it in. I don't think it has, it is a very good idea to get obsessed with a competitor product. I think it's always useful to to have your own strategy, have a clear, thesis that you're taking to market on which you're building your product. That is always useful. But you do have to understand your competitor's product just so that you can create the right strategy for your product, right? Because at the end of the day, your potential customer is going to evaluate you in that ecosystem of competitive products. There's another question that you had asked, which is about MVP versus a very perfected kind of product. And I think MVP is a great idea, almost always should be done. Having said that, there are certain circumstances in which how you define your MVP changes, right? So you will not, so for example, if you are building a premium concierge product, right? Sort of Amex Platinum equivalent product, but digital, right? You're not going to take an unfinished product, right? Because your customer is not going to, be okay with it, right? So you have to, or there is a deep tech product. Very hard to cut a thin MVP for that kind of product, right? So I would say MVP is almost always a good idea. How you cut your MVP, how do you define your MVP, has to be done in the context of the space that you've decided to build in. Okay, hopefully that answers some of your question. Coming
Online
to the
versus
offline versus online, I don't think online is a fad. I think online is of immense value, but I think some of us in fact all of the online ecosystem or the startup ecosystem is guilty of not attaching due value to the offline customer experience, to offline innovation. I think if there's one thing that, and I've also been guilty of that. I've also lived in that bubble, saying everything will become online, and in fact it got accentuated in COVID. Because the penetration was accelerated, so we started thinking, oh damn, everything is going to become online, and we'll never go back to work. And little did we realize when we were imagining these futures where everything is online and everything is remote and hybrid and all of that. Little did we realize that we were writing off the value of social connections, the value of building, drawing energy from each other, building relationships, which is so timeless, I would say. and so has such deep value for humans, right? Therefore, what we've got to realize is that, and I was telling someone that wo Blinkit aane ke baad se, I have stopped going for that weekend grocery that I used to go to, right? And that, but I also told that person today that I'm going to restart that, because it used to be my time with my daughter.
Yeah.
We would, my younger daughter and I would go, and I would give her a list and say, go fetch this, and we would talk about pros and cons of what kind of yogurt to pick and what kind of yogurt not to pick, and what dessert does she like and her friends like, and this, that, and the other, and pros and cons of should we have milk or not have milk, or all kinds of general fun stuff, right? So there, again, if you look at category by category by category, whether it is shopping, whether it is dining out, every single physical category has bounced back in a huge way after COVID got over, because there is a timeless value in physical and social experiences that I don't think we have factored in. The other issue with the way that startup ecosystem is approached, innovating, is that we've been a little lazy and a little risk averse in saying here, asset heavy stuff we will not do, right? And physical retail is asset heavy, so we will not do. It's hard to do. It's how will you manage 10,000 people, 20,000 people, distributed across hundreds or thousands of stores? It's a complex problem, so we'll not solve it. Multiples अच्छे नहीं मिलते, valuation अच्छी नहीं मिलती उसमें, इसलिए नहीं करेंगे, and so on and so forth. But if we are true innovators, if our job is to think from first principles and to apply first principle thinking, entrepreneurship and risk capital to really create better products, better services, better industries, better society, then we cannot ignore these physical products and experiences, right? So therefore, my summary to your question is, yes, online has immense value, will continue to have immense value, and we need to continue to work on that. But we also need to open up our minds and our motivations to include the offline experiences, because they are immensely valuable for our customers.
Yep.
Yeah?
The third one was consumer versus customer.
The third one is also a very interesting question, because so many such products, right? So for example, let's say a product where I'm building something for students, but I have to go through the principal and the teacher and the school, right? To my mind, let's think about one framework that I find very useful is to think about long-term success and then work backwards from that, right? If you think about long-term success, a product that looks beautiful to the principal, but actually customers hate, the students hate to use it. Do you see it being a wonderful, large, widely adopted product 5 years from now? No. So therefore, one thing you cannot sacrifice is the adoption by the end user. Like that's non-sacrificable. You have to make that constant, and then you have to think about how do you also solve for, right? The gatekeeper or the customer, because without that you're not even going to get access to your customer, right? And I think the interesting thing is there are multiple ways of approaching that problem that have emerged now, right? For example, I want to finally sell a B2B product, but I create a B2C product, which is very popular, but a freemium version of that. And I actually go and demonstrate to the principal that look, 40% of the kids in your school are already using it. This is my geofence data. That's what it's telling me, right? Or in this area, kids between 7 and 11 are already using this, and therefore I'm demonstrating to you that this is great. But there is a 20% value is what they are using, 80% value you can help unlock, right? So there are different ways. I would almost treat that customer as a go-to market and solve for it. But my eventual customer is the student, and I would not is the consumer, and that is right at the top of the pyramid for me.
Sounds good. Maybe couple more questions, Mohit and Dev. Go ahead.
I wanted to know your perspective around buying customer in tier 2 and tier 3 cities versus tier 1 cities. You must have seen through while penetrating to Zomato, and since that those are the new upcoming areas, and e-commerce will be penetrating through that. So what is the difference that you have seen, and if the brand is building only for tier 2 and tier 3 cities, is there any difference between, let's say, tier 1 and tier 2?
So if you work in PepsiCo, so it's a more ungated business. If you work in
थोड़ा सा जोर की, थोड़ा जोर की.
Like the startup, what would the approaches for more profitable rather than burning the investments?
I'm not sure I got your question, man.
Can anyone repeat? Anyone?
So, he's asking that when you launch a startup, there are two options. Probably one of them is burning money. So is there any strategy or framework that you could follow that before you burn a lot of money, you could achieve profitability in the at the least possible time?
Thank you so much.
So one was tier 2, tier 3. I think that, Mohit, is a broader question, because what we also saw during COVID, that a lot of companies burnt money, and there was this question of just scale. And then suddenly one day the question came of profitability, and a lot of them didn't raise any more money, right? So what is the right way to do it? Yeah. So the first one was tier 2, tier 3
Tier 2,
city
tier 3.
versus customer in tier 2, tier 3 city versus customer in tier 1
I
city.
think there are two different worlds as far as I've seen, and I think it's extremely hard to be able to solve for both together. You have to think deeply and care deeply about that customer. See like for example, in smaller cities, the value of time is much lesser. I'm saying it with due respect. People live more settled, more calmer lives. Their lives have more space, right? They will nicely wash their own car. They will walk to the market, and not run to the market, and so on and so forth. So, and the preferences tend to be different. It's not like people don't have money. They don't want the best. They do. You ask Tata Click Luxury, how much of their sale happens in tier 2, 3 towns. You ask Flipkart, how much of their sale happens in tier 2, tier 3 towns, across categories. So there is a lot of aspiration, a lot of spending power, but fundamentally what people care about is different. The context of their lives is different, and you have to understand that and solve that deeply. Which is why you will find that people like Misho were able to unlock a $3 billion lifestyle potential in these markets profitably now, as it seems.
That's what I want.
As opposed to, let's say, Flipkart and a Myntra and others have been around for much longer, but they always thought that this cannot be done profitably, or maybe the market is not so large and it's not ready for penetration, right? So when you care deeply about that market, and by the way, in 2018 in Zomato, we used to be in 15 cities. Swiggy used to be in 8 cities, and multiple industry experts had said the market is limited to 15 cities, never go to beyond. Within 6 months of that, we were within 5 months of that, we were in 100 cities. Within 9 months of that, we were in 500 cities. Today, Zomato operates in almost 1,000 cities, right? So therefore, market is there. How are you going to solve for it? What are the pathways that you have to create, right? To be able to deliver value to your customers is something you have to think deeply. I don't think there are surface level answer कि यार वो language change कर दो, vernacular में बना दो, and that will do the trick. I don't think it works like that. I think you really have to immerse yourself in their context and then build high quality products. They are valuable customers, and therefore within their context they expect high quality products and services.
The other question was burn versus build. State it simply.
Burn versus profitability versus just burn to grow. I think at least in the 16 years that I have spent in the startup ecosystem, I've seen these cycles come and go, right? There are phases in which the whole ecosystem, and I think the investor ecosystem, both public and private markets, have a huge impact on how startup founders are thinking about it. And I think it should change, and it is beginning to change. At the end of the day, creators also need to have their own point of view on how they want to build. Do they want to build a business patiently and capital efficiently, or do they want to build a business by burning a lot of money, right? But I think what markets reward, what investors reward is also has a large influence, and I've seen these cycles change.
Yeah.
I think we are in a phase where there is a permanent recognition of the fact that the purpose of a business is to turn a profit and to return value to shareholders, right? And therefore, building capital efficiently and delivering profits is something that should be an always on goal of a business. I think realization of that is deeper today than I've ever seen before. Across large companies, public market investors, private market investors, the biggest signal of that is that I'm beginning to see, you know, tech-driven companies or consumer tech companies and just other non-tech consumer businesses actually both being valued similarly. High quality businesses are valued highly, poor quality businesses are beaten up, right? So I think today we are living in a world where building capital efficiently and turning a profit is of humongous value. Investors are looking for it, and I think all entrepreneurs should be looking for it. It's the right way to build a business.
Sounds good. So final question from me, Mohit. What would be one advice you'll give to an entrepreneur or a to-be entrepreneur sitting here?
That's a tough one, because I'm also
Sorry for putting you on the spot.
I'm just turning into an entrepreneur, right? So it's almost like asking somebody to give gyan who hasn't done it before. I have worked with a lot of entrepreneurs. I've had the opportunity of, observing the best, learning from the best.
What do you tell yourself every night before you sleep?
I think, I think there are two things I would say that are important. One is, I think entrepreneurship is extremely hard journey. Building organizations, building businesses is extremely hard, and therefore one needs to be really clear that they are truly motivated to do it and have the depth of conviction and the staying power to really build a high quality business. Should not do it as a fad. Should not do it because someone else is doing it. Should definitely not do it to make a lot of money, right? Because at the end of the day, if you look at success rates, if you look at how hard it is to get exits, to get something to scale, to get something to exit, it is not a good way to create good economic outcomes. There are other better ways. Okay, so therefore, one thing one of the advices that I would give to people is really look inside and find true motivations, true passion, true commitment, true drive before you turn an entrepreneur. Of course, for younger people, testing waters is always a good thing to do, right? Just like, sometimes you might try कि चलो coding try कर लेते हैं, मज़ा नहीं आया, कुछ और try कर लेंगे. Sometimes you try stuff to also find your true motivation, that's fine. But before you raise money, you commit yourself, you start creating an organization where there is a responsibility on you now, to your shareholders, to your, to your employees, to people that you're hiring, to your customers, to people who are associated as vendors with your business. Before you take on that responsibility, think deeply and find your motivations. I think the second one is, find that inner confidence to be able to operate from convictions. For the longest time, because I've had the opportunity to work on large scale businesses, there is always a lot of data, right? And then you take decisions based on data. When you turn an entrepreneur, there are 100 decisions you'll have to take, and you will not have data for 20 of them or 50 of them or 98 of them. Right? And yet you will be required to take decisions and with conviction and move on and be ready to make mistakes and live with the consequences of that, right? So I think finding that conviction and that model of being able to operate and take decisions from conviction, intuition, and not just on data is the second thing I would say.
No, that was very useful, Mohit, and a very insightful conversation. I learned a lot how to think about these things, and I think a lot of what you said was being built on first principles, right? Again, looking at the problem from a first principle perspective. I can't summarize what all we discussed, but I think the take back message for me was that customer insight, your user insight is very, very important. So understand your user / customer very, very well, right? And product and whether you are solving a problem well is very, very important, right? So these are the basic kind of core, probably the core circle, and then there are many layers on top of those circles. But if you are an early stage entrepreneur, right, that is very, very important to think about. That do you understand your user very well, and are you solving his or her problem? And of course, if you want to make money, then there should be a market size, right? So your customer shouldn't just be me and Mohit and solving our problem, but there should be thousands of users to it. And what Mohit was just saying, adding to that, startups are a very, very sexy affair from outside, and they are not at all sexy from the inside, right? So they are very painful. It's a long journey, and I can tell by my personal experience, right? You have many near-death experiences going through that journey. So when you read the story in the newspaper, you have a very, very clean version of what really happened, as if the entrepreneur knew everything he or she was doing and the market was behaving in the best possible way. But the inner stories are very, very different, right? So thank you all again for coming here, and thanks Mohit for doing this session. It
Thank
was
you for
a pleasure.
having me. It was a pleasure.
Having
Thank you so much, and all the best, folks.